Thought leader Farnaz Wallace joins me on this edition of A Woman's Place. We're going to talk about how women are becoming game changers in the marketplace. I'd like to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Angela.
And you have written this wonderful book, The New World Marketplace, How Women, Youth, and Multiculturalism Are Shaping Our Future.
That's right. We just got that published.
And, you know, interesting enough, and basically what you're saying are things are changing, and if we want to be profitable, if we want to get the word out to people throughout the world, that we're going to have to look at the marketplace a lot differently than we have in the past.
Absolutely. It's not so much that the world is changing. Of course it is. It's almost cliche to say that the world changes. It's part of evolution. But I try in this book to address the pace and the complexity of these shifts that are kind of happening, these rapid cultural shifts that are happening at the lightning pace, changing the global economy. And I try to break these down into three major macro trends. And one is the new and shifting roles of women both at home and at work. And I also try to address the ideological power and the new values that the new generation holds, the Gen Y, and also the growth and influence of the multiculturalism and the multicultural consumers and societies. And I know this show is particularly about women, but even within the macro trend of women, you're still dealing with the shift of culture with the Gen Y generation. You're still dealing with the multicultural issues. So this was a great fit. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. And you know what it seemed to me when I was reading your book was that, you know, we are still in many ways dealing with a 1950s model in the Western world. And that 1950s model does not translate very well in the where we are today.
Absolutely. I call it the world of Mad Men is dead, and alive in its place is a new world that's pulsing with the culturally diverse makeup of social models, relationships, both personal and professional, business models, as well as leadership. I mean, it's really truly a new world marketplace.
So how do we begin to, and I think one of the things I would suggest, and I really think you brought up some really interesting points, is that one of the things that I got out of this is that we have to begin to not base how we market our products or our ideas based on the stereotypes of who we think people are.
You are absolutely correct, Angela. I kind of coined the phrase marketing to the customers inside, not outside. Because, you know, for one, I was a CMO, and I used to do the segmentation analysis and take a look at, well, you know, based on race and ethnicity and income and demographics, how do people behave? But those segmentation analysis no longer working, because putting different segments of the population into a box based on race, ethnicity, income, gender roles, or youth mindset is no longer holding. So what's happening is a lot of progressive companies are learning to segment based on needs, based on values, based on thought process, based on belief systems and causes. So once you start grouping that and you try to kind of find commonalities as it relates to shared common values, that's when the companies can not only understand the customer's needs, but also learn to transcend them.
So it seems to me that the questions you get on those questionnaires need to change.
Absolutely. You know? In fact, you are spot on, because I said exactly that in my book, that, you know, research can tell you anything you want to know, but it could also validate your orthodoxies. It can also validate the things that you want to protect so much. So we have to be careful what questions we ask. You can ask the customer what they want, and they're not going to tell you, I want you to make money. They're going to say, I want this, I want that. And it's really more about understanding your trade-offs as well as your benefits and explaining that to the customer. But more importantly, try to align the company values with the shared values of the new customers, the changing landscape for the customers, because I get into that quite a bit. The values are changing, not just for the three macro trends, but just in general. What people cherish, and it's true to their heart, is not the same as it was a decade ago.
And you know, it's interesting. I think we see this more than ever in the workplace, you know, in terms of who comes to work and how people work. I mean, everything that you talked about, I see in the workplace, that youth have, younger people have a whole different idea about their work life. It's like, oh, I'm going to work and not have fun? Oh, heck no. It's 5 o'clock. That's what time I get off. I'm leaving. You know, because I think the 50s model was like work hard, stay long, progress, move up the ladder. And I think the younger generations have seen their parents do that and recognize that might not be a healthy model.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned work. You can walk into any business. You can walk into any mall, any schools. You know, even movies, the pop culture, they already reflect all these changes. The challenge that we have is that that top 5 to 8% of leadership in businesses, social leaders, and I'm talking even in media and advertising.
Let's talk about that and how it impacts women.
Yes.
Because, you know, when we talk about that 1950s model,
Yes.
you know, it's mommy in the kitchen and it's mommy taking care of the kids and it's mommy not working. And we know that that has shifted dramatically.
Yes.
And one of the things that you brought up in your book was the idea about the Super Bowl commercials and how they basically don't represent today's woman.
No, I mean, research shows that, 85% of the total buying power, consumer buying power, are in the hands of women. 85%. And yet, 91% of women don't feel the advertising appeals to them or relate to them. And I'm kind of scratching my head going, why is that? Well, when you take a look at, the advertising agencies, the chief creative directors, folks that are, winning all these awards, there are not that many women on multiculturalism. It's almost cliche to say sex sells. My question in the book was to whom? Who are you talking to? And who do you think your customers really are? Do you really know who your customers are? Do you know who is making the decisions? I mean, it's interesting, all these beer ads during Super Bowls that we see, and they all show all these guys really masculine and kind of mimicking and modeling the aggression of the football game. And yet, 51% of folks that are watching the Super Bowl are women. You go to any bars, and, it's been a while since I've been there, but I hear women complain that there are not enough men in the bar for them to meet. And yet, you see all these advertising and marketing campaigns that are just so masculine in nature. And ultimately, Angela, it comes down to this. Do you want to profit? Do you want to generate revenues? Do you want to succeed in the next 3 to 5 years? And if so, you've got to learn to embrace these 3 macro trends and understand your changing customers' needs and values. Or ultimately, you're going to hit a wall.
So are women in some way responsible in terms of relinquishing power? I mean, you talk about 51% of women are in the workplace. 51% of women are also watching this Super Bowl game. Why are we being vocal about what it is that we need for these companies to service us or service our needs?
I think we're getting there slowly. There are organizations like Misrepresentation that they have all these hashtags. They're very, very active in the social media realm, and they encourage consumers, women and men, to speak up. But I think also the top management, even those few women, even that 5 to 8% women that are there, they have been trained under a very masculine, old school type of leadership. So I try to address it from a mindset standpoint and social model standpoint, not necessarily dividing the genders or the cultures, but more in terms of, how do we really, as people in general, embrace more of a partnership model and a linking mentality versus the ranking. And I think by default, we're going to see that shift happen. Because for every 2 boys that are going to school and graduating, 3 girls are. You already are seeing in the middle management realm over 51 to 52% that are women. So by default, we're going to get there. By default, as baby boomers retire, we're going to see more women being represented. The key is, how do we change the leadership style?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, because if these women have been trained in this old model, and you find that a lot of places where, women get excited, oh, it's a woman here, and then you get into the room with them and you recognize it's just a man in female clothing.
Now you're singing from my heart, because that has been what I have been trying to preach a lot, because we as women need to learn to do it differently. If we mimic the same behavior as the Super Bowl commercial and the way that we've been taught to lead, and this is the success archetype, the culture will not change, only the genders will.
So what do you say to women who are in that top tier of leadership? What do you say to them in terms of what women need to do to begin to grasp this information so that we can be more effective in getting our messages out?
And that's a great question. I would start by saying let's redefine or define the modern woman archetype. Let's define or redefine smart power. It's not about soft power or hard power. It's about smart power. Let's define and redefine the new world leadership. I have a chapter on that in the book, because when we talk about masculine, feminine, soft, hard, those are qualities that, we both know there are a lot of compassionate, soft men, and there are many women who are not. So it's not so much on gender, but I think we need to shift the dialogue into speaking of the qualities and, again, values versus, gosh, this is a war between men and women, because it's not. And,
I think when you talk about youth, and I think about young women and how they are showing up in the world, I think in many ways that these are the women who will lead us to a place of more parity between the sexes, because the way our young people see race and the way they see different cultures is a whole lot different than the way that I may see them.
You are absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think if it weren't for the influence of maybe parents at home, we wouldn't, I see the Gen Y generation to be extremely colorblind and gender neutral. The gender roles are blurred. When we take a look at the 2010 census data, the under 18 population, Angela, the white and also black is steady or on a decline. Where you see the growth in the younger generation, just in population alone, are Hispanics, Asian, biracials. So a lot of the issues that existed for us will not exist for them. But how do we redefine corporate culture as this new generation comes and starts working? And that's part of why you and I are talking on air today.
Yes. And what you're saying is, we're going to have to think of that 51% and that growing number of women.
Yes.
We're going to have to think of a world, or particularly in the United States, we're going to have to think that it's no longer the white world anymore. It's
Absolutely.
not even, we can't even say that. We have more and more people from all countries. And you talked about the Asian connection.
Yes.
Because we've been focusing so much on the Hispanic growth.
Yes.
But you talk about the growth in the Asian community.
And multiracial. Because it is amazing, the multiracial, that has the highest increase in terms of percentage on the 2010 census data. But I think it's also important, Angela, to note that when we speak of multiculturalism and it does not exclude whites.
Yes.
It really doesn't. And I think there's a lot of backlash all over Europe and a little bit in the Western communities about the multiculturalism. And people are really afraid of that word. And I try to emphasize it doesn't exclude whites. It's basically saying multiple cultures existing in one place and trying to find commonalities in the cross-cultural values.
But the strangest thing, I had a white friend who says, I have no culture. And sometimes it's that whole idea, that when we talk about multicultural, it's somebody else, so we kind of put whites in this box over here, and that's
stereotyping too.
Yes. But and sometimes in her mind, she had stereotyped her own community. So.
We all do that to ourselves. She must have a lot of culture if she's your friend. So.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for being here
me.
on A Woman's Place. As you said, there are a lot of things for us to think about, but there's also a lot of things for us to do.
Yes.
So what would you suggest a company or organization, a woman-led nonprofit organization, what is one suggestion you would have for her to help her move forward in our changing world?
Be open to change and embrace it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Farnaz Wallace has been my guest on this segment of A Woman's Place. She's the author of The New World Marketplace and is one of our great thought leaders. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me, Angela.